Welcome to a very special edition of Fanlight Zone Presents. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also the editor-in-chief here at FLZ. To my left, you're right at home. He is one of our featured editors here at FLZ. You know him from 607 The Wrestling Show and New Comic Book Day because you see his name a lot in all the reviews we're dropping. Give a warm welcome to Rich.
That is right. We are here to talk comics. We are here to talk Comixology comics. And we are here with one of my favorite creators. So this is going to be an awesome day.
Absolutely, because when we knew this writer had a new book coming out, our entire team stopped. Because if you know his work from such books as Star Wars, Jedi Knights, Spider-Man and Wolverine, The Adventures of Ulysses Monarch, to name a few, because trust me, he does everything he does is so well. It obviously has got our attention. And then this book that we're talking about, a sci-fi murder mystery in the Forbidden Realm. And it is one that we have got the pleasure of reading, and everybody really needs to check this out because holy smokes, the ending to issue 1, let alone where this series is going to go, is going to absolutely rock everybody. And we are so excited to talk to him on the phone and give a warm welcome to the one and only Marc Guggenheim, writer of The Whisper War. Marc, what's going on?
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that great introduction. I'm going to cancel therapy for the week. Okay.
It is our pleasure, and it's absolutely 100% true. I mean, like I said, your stuff is always fantastic to check out. And then this story alone, I need to know, how did this whole Whisper War come to be?
So it's a good question. So I was helping a friend of mine with a graphic novel project, and for a variety of different ways, we brought in for that project Sadat Ozcan, who's the artist on the Whisper War. And Sadat and I really sort of hit it off, and we started talking about doing a creator-owned book together. This was like during the Writers Guild strike in 2023. Yeah. And I sort of went into the strike, I'm not writing TV or film because I'm on strike. And I'm, just writing comics. And I start working on the Whisper War. And the first thing is that I knew Sadat's work. Like he had let me flip through his whole portfolio when we were at New York Comic Con one year. So I really sort of knew what he likes to draw and what's really in his wheelhouse. So that was all sort of hanging in the back of my mind as I'm basically walking the picket line in New York City. If you accept the premise that the previous Writers Guild strike in 2007 was based upon the new introduction of technology that we now call streaming. The 2023 strike was really a reaction to the advent of streaming, to be very sort of reductive about it. Mm-hmm. It's a long way of saying I got very interested in how one more begets another, and typically how a new technology is oftentimes the spark for a conflict, subsequent conflict. Although I was interested in that idea, I didn't think that issues like data sharing and spam protection and internet residuals would be the subject of a very interesting comic book. But I still was stuck on this idea of, well, what if there's a war in reaction to the advent of a new technology? That idea struck me as very interesting. And I thought, well, what if the new technology was time travel? And that was really the beginnings of it. In large part because of Sadat's art, I wanted to do a sci-fi story that started out as a Blade Runner-esque mystery and becomes a galactic conflict in the vein of Star Wars. Because that would allow me to sort of approach both ends of the spectrum of Sadat's art. Sort of put these, very sort of random and somewhat, disconnected ideas sort of in my mental hopper, and Whisper War is what came out. My process is very strange in the sense that I do a lot of pre-thinking. I just will just cogitate, mentally on things before sitting down and opening my notebook and doing, what I call actual thinking, which is, me writing longhand, playing with ideas and stuff. So I just spent a lot of time thinking about it, and yeah, this was the result.
So knowing that how this came together, now it's time for what is the famous elevator pitch for the Whisper War?
It's funny. I don't have a great elevator pitch for it. The way that I tend to describe it is it's a Blade Runner mystery that leads to a Star Wars like conflict that is all centered around time travel. But it's not time travel in the way you've ever seen time travel done before. Typically with a time travel story, it's like someone's traveling to the past or someone's traveling to the future. Or even like we're dealing with changes as a result of someone traveling to the past or traveling to the future. And the approach of time travel here is very different. It's sort of like, what if time travel really existed? It wouldn't just be a one-off of go back to the past and change it. It would be like, especially if there was a war about it, it would be over, well, like one side changes history, another side changes history, and suddenly like you don't even know what history is anymore, because history becomes this thing that's been written and rewritten and overwritten. And there are these like sort of artifacts, temporal artifacts that are starting to crop up, inconsistencies, because time travel is messy and rewriting history is messy. So I wanted to play around with those ideas. And I would actually, without spoiling too much, I asked Sadat in the first issue to take it on the chin a little bit and I wrote in some very specific continuity errors that make it look like Sadat is just a sloppy artist. That's what I mean by take it on the chin. But you'll see in subsequent issues, like those were not continuity errors, and that wasn't Sadat making a mistake. Those were specifically written in to set up certain things that happen later in the series.
And trust me, folks, when you read issue number 1, you're really going to have to pay attention because there's so much going on with this. And to kind of piggyback off what you were saying about when you started working with Sadat, because this is the first story that you kind of geared towards a specific artist. Yeah. When you're doing world building like this, what was the biggest challenge, would you say, in world building with such a different focus that you're gearing it towards somebody's work?
In many ways, it actually was easier. Because it was actually easier rather than harder, because in the case of Sadat, like, I know what his aesthetic is, and I know like how he approaches design issues. And like I said, I was trying to write something that was very much in line with what I know he likes to draw. As I'm describing certain things, I'm describing them, I don't know how to put this, like I'm describing them in a way that I know he'll interpret them, just knowing his sensibilities as an artist. So in many ways, it made things a lot easier. Typically what I do with a big world building thing like this is I'll before I write the first issue, I'll write what's called a style script, which is sort of like the comic book equivalent of like a show Bible. It's basically like, here's how I think things look in this world. Here's how I think things operate. Here's what makes things different for this specific project. So by doing that, I'm trying to articulate and get down on paper the look that I'm ultimately hoping to get out of the artists. But like I said, I'd almost sort of internalized what Sadat likes, not just likes to draw, but how he draws, like how he visualizes things. Sorry, it's very hard to describe, but
no, you're hitting the key points with it, because like I say, it's knowing that little piece, and after reading issue 1, like it really stands out, and it's kind of like knowing some of your other great work that you've done. It's just like the difference in the creative process for us. Like that's just something that jumps out amongst many other elements of this book.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. And by the way, like there's a lot of stuff that Sadat brought to it, like Jasper, the robot detective in the first issue. Like, I forget exactly what I originally had in my head or what I had described in the script. But Sadat was like, I see this in a different way. You know, can I try something? And it was great, and I loved it. And he basically gave Jasper this reflective head. You know, he doesn't really have a face. He just has this reflective head that actually. Because of the reflection, Jasper's face is really the face of whoever he's talking to, because that face is reflected in his head. And I thought, wow, that's just a really great idea, you know, particularly for like a law enforcement, you know, type of character. And because of the nature of the series and the length of the series, you know, we don't see much of Jasper past issue 2. But, you know, as Sadat and I have been talking about and kicking around ideas for the next Shattered Realm series, you know, we were like, ooh, it'd be fun to either do something specifically about Jasper or maybe about these robot detectives, you know, who are called automatons, you know, from their perspective. I love the look that Sadat came up with. It's both provocative but really classic, like very classic sci-fi, which I really dug.
Yeah, no, it's impressive, and I like I say, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm super excited to hear we're having more of this realm coming, or at least talks of it right now. Because, like I say, issue 1, trust me, folks, I cannot stress enough about how good it is.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we definitely want to do more Shattered Realm, and Sadat's very hot to trot. It's me, and I've been the impediment, because just my schedule has been, you know, when I started this, you know, like I said, it was during the writer strike, so right. You know, a good, you know, half of my workload was gone. But now obviously the strike is over, and I'm back working in TV and film, and it's hard to you know, to find time.
I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about what is probably going to be a lot of people's new favorite character. I know I certainly love the character, especially because of what I'm about to say. But Axel Jandari is a very complex character, to say the least. What are, you know, when writing that, obviously you wanted that to come across. Is there any challenges that came up in writing that character, especially with the complexities?
You know, yeah, because I mean, I'm trying to articulate this without spoiling too much. Yeah. But because of those temporal artifacts, he's a character who his memory, shall we say, is not particularly reliable. And it is a real challenge to write a character who's got these gaps and inconsistencies in his memory, because our memories are sort of like who or what makes us. You know, in fact, I would argue like our memories are more dispositive of who we are than our DNA is. So when you're, you know, if you proceed from that premise with a character, it makes writing the character a little tricky. You know, and I tried to sort of write him as being, because his past is so murky and has so many sort of like gaps and contradictions in it. I tried to make him a character who's very focused on the present, because that's the thing he knows and that's the thing he can control. That perspective is both helpful and I think detrimental to him as we move through the investigation portion of the story.
Like I say, it's just the complexity of him is just another factor of this, and especially in dealing with a sci-fi story like this. Like, you're no stranger to sci-fi work. What would you say about this genre that you find the most interesting and challenging as a creator?
You know, it's the same answer, really. I love how much freedom you have when you're world building, and that's both wonderful and terrible at the same time. Because it's wonderful because really the world's your oyster, but you know, that amount of option can really, you know, if you let it, that can really tie your hands, you know, or be intimidating. And it's like, you know. And what I've sort of learned over the years, just having been involved with a lot of world building projects by this point, it really, to me, comes down to, you know, you have no boundaries to start, but you have to start creating some for yourself, so that you start, you know, honing in on the world and start defining things. Because a lot of world building is the rules, is like the rules of your particular world. And, for this particular project, there were very sort of specific things, that I decided on early on. Like, for example, there aren't aliens, in this world. This doesn't take place on Earth. It takes place in a completely different galaxy, in a completely different reality. But there aren't any aliens. And, there's space travel, but it's a very specific kind of space travel. And creating those barriers for myself, it sounds contradictory because it is a little bit. It's like you get into it because, there are no boundaries, but you have to set up some in order to tell the story you want to tell. All stories, if they're going to have a narrative cohesion to them, they've got to, have guardrails on them. Otherwise, you end up introducing concepts, late in the game that's just like, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Stupid, I think the reader needs to know that they're in hands that are going to play fair with them. There won't be like, aha, and for the sake of a plot twist, I'm going to introduce this brand new concept that wasn't set up earlier. It's a little bit like, Chekhov's gun, you've got to, it's not just the gun that has to be set up. It's all the rules surrounding the gun. It's the circumstances under which the gun is going to get fired. Otherwise, all that stuff, just, it feels random and therefore anything random is always going to feel unsatisfying.
As alluded to, sci-fi is a very familiar realm to you, but with the amount of work you've done across all genres, is there a certain genre you like writing the most, and why?
That's a great question. I always feel like the genre I love writing the most is always whatever genre I'm not writing at the time, But I wish I could. I mean, look, I'm obviously I gravitate towards superheroes, both superheroes who wear capes and superheroes who don't. I definitely gravitate towards those types of stories. But like, I love whatever I'm not doing, at the time. Like, I will say, like, when I do write something set in the legal arena, I really, really enjoy that. I'm very non-monogamous, which I think you can probably tell from my writing. It's like, I kind of like it all, and I want to play in all the different arenas.
Which is not a bad thing, because like I said, I love the fact that you diversify everything, and it really does like bring something to, because then you even see like a little bit of crossover in that into different stories, because it's freeing that you can be able to go, okay, well, because I'm familiar in this realm or this realm, I can kind of mix a little bit of the column A with column B, and you kind of really get that in the Whisper War, because it's not just sci-fi, but there's also a criminal element to it as well.
Yeah, totally. Like, and I grew up as a writer writing procedurals, like working on shows like Law and Order and CSI Miami. So like there's an aspect of the police procedural that's very, sort of foundational for me. So it's fun to be able to bring in that stuff. It's kind of like, I wish I had a brand as a writer, but my brand, I think, is I have no brand. Or as I like to say, my brand is Jack of all trades, master of none.
It's not a bad place to be.
No, that's definitely not a bad. No, that's definitely not, because the more experience and the more areas you dabble into, like, I think that just it helps with the overall vision of what you want to do and grow as a writer or creator, like whatever you're doing, because you obviously don't want to stay in one lane. You want to just experience it all, and because you'll always take something from whatever you're working on into something
else. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big believer. I always tell like emerging writers, like, every project informs the next project. I always learn something when I'm writing. And it's, and I'm always playing around, with how I'm telling the story, and how I tell stories in general. That, hopefully you're always evolving and changing as an artist.
I mean, you have to, because otherwise you fall behind the times, and then it snowballs from there. So you always got to just try evolving with it, and just putting your own spin on it as well.
Yeah.
And looking at this story, and obviously I don't want to dive into spoilers past issue 1, because I want everybody to go out and read it and enjoy it and sing the praises of it like we are. But is there any character that, if we have not been introduced to him yet, what issue should we look for him at, that surprised you the most in the creative process?
I want to say that in issue 3, we're introduced to this sort of high priestess of what is essentially a religion.
Okay.
And she was a blast to write. And I wasn't expecting her to be like that interesting a character. She really kind of exists, really just to help service the plot. But, I really enjoyed writing her on the page. And then I really love the way Sadat drew her. And there's something kind of like mischievous about her, and unexpected. And it was unexpected to me that she would be such a fun character. So she's kind of like, she's enigmatic, but deliberately so. And you get the sense that she's really enjoying fucking with your head. She likes that she's frustrating people. And that just was the character wasn't initially conceived of that way. Like I said, the character was really just conceived of at the beginning. It was like, how do I, move the plot from A to B?
Sometimes that's the best way characters come in.
Yes.
That,
oh yeah.
And it's kind of borrowing from you doing Law and Order stuff. It's like the person that leads you to the person that leads you to the person. Sometimes it's more interesting than the person.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's funny that's the thing I really loved about the early years of Law and Order before I got there. Like, you got a sense you were just meeting all these interesting people in New York City, and you were, in the middle of their lives. I mean, it's funny, like, if you work at a kitchen at a busy restaurant, when the cops come to talk to you, you're not like moving around the kitchen and talking to people. You're talking to the cops. But on Law and Order, you really got a sense of everyone's inner life, because they're busy doing their jobs as they're talking to the cops, which of course would never happen in real life, but it really gave you a lot of character. It's funny, on Law and Order, we used to say that, because Law and Order, the rap on Law and Order was all story and no character. And we were like, no, actually, like, when done well, Law and Order is all character. It's just you have to establish those characters in a single moment or a single line of dialogue, which, I would argue is harder than giving a full scene or a full episode to a character.
Let's have some fun with this in the day and age of the crossover, and being that this is a big world and in hopefully an even bigger universe. What character, if money isn't an object, legal rights aren't an object, what character would you love to cross over with Axel, and why?
Gosh, this is the type of question, like, we'll get off this podcast and I'll think of 15 other potential answers. But knee-jerk response, Rick Deckard from Blade Runner.
Okay.
Because in many ways, I will say, like, Axel and Deckard have a lot in common. They're both guys who are like sort of reluctant investigators, and they both have these sort of checkered, sort of pasts, and they're both, if you follow the Deckard as a replicant theory, they're both different than, I don't want to spoil it. In the case of Axel, you're going to see there's a big sort of mindfuck kind of reveal coming with Axel in issue 4. So I don't want to spoil it, but it could feel Deckard-esque. He's not a robot. He's not a robot.
No. Okay.
Right on. Honestly, that was who I was going to go with when I read it, because, like I said, you do get it's what you said in the description. You do get quite a bit of like, that world kind of lends itself to be very similar to Blade Runner.
Yes, and by design. I mean, I think we wear our Blade Runner influences on our sleeve.
Yeah, and it's great because once again, it's such a, Blade Runner is such a great universe, and then you take this universe and you kind of expand that a little more, and kind of
Yeah.
even like you said, give it a little bit more of a the more of a sci-fi edge to
Mhm.
like lead it towards something bigger. Like this is the small piece that leads to something bigger. It's kind of really, really, really cool.
Thanks. This was a real labor of love, and I love the work that Sadat did, and I'd be remiss if I didn't call out Carlos Cabrera, who is to call him the colorist is you know i- is to really sort of only describe half the job that he did here. I mean, he's practically a co-artist with Sadat, given he's not just coloring things, he's adding all this detail and rendering. This is a very, very unconventional, for comics art, art style that we've got going here. And I think it's one of the things that makes the book special.
Yeah. I think once readers check this out, from top to bottom, this book has got so much that if you're not a diehard sci-fi fan, if you're just a little bit in mystery, it has literally something for everybody. And I think once readers dive into this book, they're going to be blown away by the art. The story is amazing, and really get entranced with this, new world that we're watching build in front of us. Because, like I say, when they get to the last page, and no spoilers, you're going to literally have the wait, what moment? And then that is going to make you go, all right, Comixology, where do I need to go get issue number 2? I need to make sure I'm subbed up for this. This is going to be one of the favorite sci-fi stories of the year, bar none, folks. I cannot overstate this enough. Marc, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. We definitely have to do it again very, very soon.
Thank you guys very, very much. I really appreciate you reading the book and supporting the book and the kind words you said about the book. So thank you. Thank you very, very, very much.
Oh, absolutely. Our pleasure. On behalf of Rich and myself, make sure you're subscribed up to Fanlight Zone on YouTube, and make sure to check us out every single Wednesday for new comic book day releases. But the review of The Whisper War is going to be out on Tuesday. So you want to make sure you check that out while you're going over to Comixology Originals, clicking on and downloading this amazing story, because trust us, you don't want to miss it. So that being said, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.